Welcome, everyone. Give us a moment as we get started on this panel. Come in. While you're coming in, let us know in the chat where are you listening from. I love to see kind of, whether people are listening from the East Coast, the West Coast, a different country. So definitely let us know where you're listening from as we are just getting started. We're going to get started in a few minutes, but we want to give you time to come in. Welcome, welcome. Like I said, if you're just coming in, give us a moment. We're just gonna let people filter in a little bit. We're gonna get started about 5 past, or I guess 20 past. But as you come in the chats, let us know where you're listening from, what states, what city, what country. Let us know if you're representing a school, if you're a school-based counselor or a community-based organization representing a community. We'd love to hear that as well. Welcome to the people watching on Facebook. Welcome to our YouTube live streamers. We're so excited for you guys. We are going to get just a couple of minutes. And while we're doing that, I know the panelists are also putting in the chat where they are streaming from, which is also pretty exciting. Wonderful. We have someone from the San Francisco Bay Area, someone from Chicago. Metzli's calling in from New York. I'm normally based in Maryland, but right now I'm in Philadelphia. It's always sunny in Philadelphia. Is that the thing? It is sunny. Come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. So if you haven't told us where you're from, please let us know in the chat where you're from. And then I will get started. We have someone from Charleston, South Carolina. And then I'm going to get started also with reading you a little bit about the panelists as we kind of wait for people to come in. So our panelists today, we have Veronica Zapata, who is an admissions officer and first-year support coordinator from Macalester College. Veronica graduated from Macalester in 2019 with a double major in psychology and music. She's the child of immigrants from Mexico who has worked as an admissions officer at Macalester College for the past 3 years. She's passionate about diversity and admissions, and she also mentors first-year students on campus. I love that. And a fun fact about Veronica, I know that she was really instrumental in a podcast for first-year students as well. And so that was really cool. You can definitely check that out, even if you're not a Macalester student. Also, fun fact for those of you listening, we here at S. Montgomery Consulting actually recently launched a podcast, La Mayor Decisión. It is a podcast in Spanglish to kind of help students who are navigating the college process as a Latinx student. Maybe your parents would prefer to listen to information in college in Spanish. Maybe you would, or maybe you just like so. We are really excited about that. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Next, we have Hee Cho, and please correct me if I'm not saying that correctly. Okay, great, I got a thumbs up. Minnie graduated from Macalester College also in 2019 with a double major in economics and political science. She currently works as a consultant at Resolution Economics in Chicago, where she analyzes data. Minnie is Korean and also a DACA recipient. She also works as a community organizer for immigration reform and is passionate about improving the pathways to citizenship. Metzli Nieves Dominguez is a senior at Barnard College who was born in Mexico and raised in the Bronx. Metzli is an immigration rights advocate who began advocating for undocumented youth in her own high school after noticing the lack of support for students like her. As part of her ongoing journey to support the immigrant community, Metzli is a member of immigration rights organizations and continues to support undocumented youth in navigating higher education spaces. And then our fourth panelist for today is Mariana Campos Horta. Mariana is a college admissions coach who loves to help students of all backgrounds discover and pursue their interests. Mariana graduated from the University of California, Berkeley and Princeton University, shout out to Princeton, studying sociology, demography, and college admissions counseling. Before starting Apply Well, she worked as a researcher, a university teaching assistant, a writing center tutor, and a college essay coach. She lives in Montclair, New Jersey, where she volunteers for education-related initiatives, including a program for undocumented immigrant youth. And I can tell you that I know that Mariana is definitely well sought out as a speaker on issues relating to Latinx students at Princeton. And so we are so thrilled to have all of our panelists here. I'm sure this is going to be a very good discussion and hopefully very helpful and inspiring discussion to students. So I have some questions here. We will also be taking questions from you guys listening in the chat, in the Q&A, right? So if you have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A. And I will just kind of throw these questions out at certain, some of them are going to be broad and some of them are going to be for specific panelists. But my first question is, just broadly, what is one piece of advice present that you would give to your past self, right, before starting college? So what is one piece of advice present you would give to your past self before starting college? And we're actually going to start with Mariana for this question.
It's not about getting in, it's about getting out with a degree. So the choices that you make right now about which colleges are on your list are fundamental in deciding whether you're getting out with a degree. There are many colleges you can get in. They'll be difficult to get out with a degree. So pay a lot of attention with your college list, to your college list. That's, the number one step you need to take to find those colleges that are affordable, they're accessible, they're welcoming, they care about the diversity, they will support you, they'll support you financially, they'll support you emotionally and academically. So that's my one advice for everyone.
I love that. What about Veronica? What advice would present you give past you? We're going in reverse order in case you guys can't tell.
I love that you're switching it up. I would give myself a lot of advice, but the one piece I'm going to share with everyone is don't be afraid to ask for help. I remember, especially as a first-generation student, just navigating a college campus, I was so afraid to just do something wrong. And it's fine. You're going to do things wrong. It happens all the time. And it gives you the opportunity to learn from your mistakes. But really seeking out help when you need it is only going to make that journey a little bit easier for you, less stressful, which if you can be less stressed during college, that's exactly what you want.
Amazing. And then we're going to go with Minnie and then Metzli.
Yeah, I think one piece of advice I would give myself is probably to not compare my college experience with my peers. I grew up in like a very white suburban neighborhood in Illinois, and everyone seemed to really know where they're going in college and knowing what they wanted to major in, and they were excited about sororities and all that stuff. But my experience and outlook about college was so different, and it was so stressful to think that my experience wasn't going to be as fun or cool as my peers, but just realizing that my experience is going to be different, I think is something that I would have told my past self.
Absolutely. And then round us out, Metzli.
Yeah, I think everyone has said very valuable advice. All advice I would give myself as well. However, I do think one thing that was really hard for me in college was being okay with the idea of switching my majors. And I hear all the time of oh, it's okay if you switch your major, it's fine, don't worry. But it's easier said than done, especially being a first generation student and low income. We have a lot of pressure from our family or peers to kind of have it all figured out. So yeah, just basically it's okay to not have it figured out.
No, I love that. I love all of that piece of advice. It's really about giving yourself grace too, right? I think we can be so hard on ourselves, especially when we think about the college admissions process. There's a lot of pressure We have to feel like we have to have it all figured out. I had nothing figured out, like nothing. And so I think that your advice is really just resonating with me, even just like thinking about my past self, like really giving yourself grace, and it is okay not to have it all figured out. This panel, like as we've said, is really about helping students that might have some immigration issues that they need to work with when we talk about the college admission process. So I wanted to kind of start with just resources. So what are some resources available for undocumented students? Like what's like the first step that they should take in this journey if they're thinking about going to college, but they really don't know? Anyone can kind of jump in there. Mariana, you got it.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to put this here on the chat for everyone. And it's information about what states support undocumented students. Of course, we're talking about undocumented broadly. You may be afraid that your visa is going to age out if you're on H4, or you may have arrived as an asylum seeker and never been able to even apply for asylum. So you're really undocumented, and changing your immigration status is difficult. For all of you, I think this link will be helpful. It tells you what kind of support you can expect from your state and your in-state public universities. And that tells you a lot about access in your state. Another resource is a list of colleges that may not be complete, but it may not be completely accurate, but it's the best list I have for the private colleges that give cover full need for undocumented students. So I think this will be very helpful. Other resource is people like Veronica. You can't be shy. Call your admissions counselor at the colleges you're looking to. They don't want to hear from people like me, and they don't want to hear from people like Sydney. They'll meet us in other venues, but we can't call them for you, even if you're our clients. You really need to call and start a relationship. Not call every week, call every day, but make a connection. Don't call on the phone, I would say email first, but get in touch and go to college fairs and connect with people like Veronica, because they're going to tell you the details that apply to your specific case in their college. And I think access is 99% of this game. You know, a lot of your friends may be thinking about what schools are like them, and people have interests a lot like theirs. And to me, it's always been which schools are going to help me graduate, because I didn't have any parents to pay. So I needed help from my schools. And I think a lot of you are on the same boat. So the best school for you is the one that's going to give the most aid. And I hope that these two resources help you identify those schools.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Minnie, I'd love to follow that up. Same question, what resources, and maybe you could talk a little bit about what it was like for you as a DACA student going through the college process and what resources you used as well.
Yeah, going off of what Mariana said, like when I was applying to colleges, I would reach out to the admissions email like address that they provided, and I would ask them like, who can I connect with to talk more about like my citizenship status and being like a DACA recipient. And I think that first interaction is really telling of whether or not a school is going to be like a good environment for you if you're undocumented. You know, a lot of schools kind of replied saying like they weren't sure what I was talking about. Some other schools were more eager. They're like, oh, I'll connect you with this person. They know so much about this and they can help you through the process. So that is like a really good way to distinguish what school might be the best environment for the situation that you have. And another thing, I think when I was navigating college websites, if it's like super difficult to find any resources for undocumented students of color, finding like that particular school's Department of Multicultural Life, then I don't think that it could be, I didn't think that it would be the right environment for me because they were making it so difficult to find these resources just on a website. So those were like two things that I was looking out for, and particularly when I was looking for colleges to apply to, I was definitely the most important thing for me was like meeting my financial need. So I would look through websites and see like the ranking of schools that like met your financial need, regardless of income or like status. So there was like a U.S. News article that had like schools that meet full financial need, and I kind of went through the list to pick out what kind of schools to look into more. Um, I personally didn't have like the best grades to like think that I could go to like Harvard or Yale or something. So I kind of like went to the middle. I think Macalester was like number 30 or 40 or something. And I saw that name pop out and I just looked into it. They had a really good website for undocumented students. The admissions people directed me to someone in the Department of Multicultural Life. And that was like really helpful and essential in helping me choose where to go.
Amazing. And then Metzli, similarly, but slightly different. You were undocumented when you applied to college. What resources did you use? Did you find helpful? And also just talk to us a little bit about your experience applying.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like it definitely started in the classroom where I started getting very familiarized with my guidance counselor. I went to the High School of Fashion Industries, and for folks who are not familiar with it, it's a very large school. My graduating class was like 400 and something students for like 4 guidance counselors, and it's just only the senior class. So obviously the counselors, it's really hard to build that one-on-one connection with so many kids. So I started becoming really familiarized with my guidance counselor and asking her questions. And she was able to connect me with people or like here, like, talk to this person at this school. And I also think one thing that Mariana really highlighted was the whole research aspect. And I really had to like get out of my comfort level as a senior in high school and ask questions. And, it's okay to like send them an email and then like, present yourself like it's fine. But it was really scary for me, at least being a senior and being a teenager and trying to reach out to like, these big name schools. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like what if something happens? Like, obviously normal like anxiety that you get being undocumented and even just talking about your status. And I definitely think researching and getting familiar with like your guidance counselor and the counselors at the school that you're thinking about and not being afraid to ask questions is really, really beneficial.
That's really good. That's really, really good. And Veronica, like from the other side of the desk, what resources do you see that that maybe students don't know about that can help them if they're undocumented, if they have DACA, or if they're just trying to navigate this process?
Yeah, I think everyone has mentioned this, but reaching out to the admissions office, not to toot my own horn, but oftentimes the schools have at least one person designated to work with international students. It really depends on the school if they treat documented students as international. That really varies from institution to institution, but just familiarizing yourself with the school, being able to meet with someone either via email, via phone. Nowadays, you can even meet with people via Zoom, which is really cool. And beginning to ask those questions, as scary as it might be, like it's only going to make it easier on you to have those answers, to know the next steps, especially as undocumented students. What else was I going to say? Talking to your counselor as well, looking at those resources Mariana mentioned, the websites of the colleges you're looking at, like Minnie said, just all of that.
So following up with that, actually, Minnie mentioned that when she was going through her college research, schools that did not have a lot of information or resources for undocumented students or DACA students, she felt like that was kind of a red flag to her, like maybe this school isn't going to be a good fit for me. So Veronica, as an admissions officer, I want you to kind of speak to the fact or the question really, what do you think still needs to be done to improve an admissions process? What can we do to start catalyzing the change? What do schools need to start doing in order to make it easier for students with differentiated documentation?
Yeah, I think a lot can be done. However, within the admissions process, just being as clear as possible. not everyone is going to have the same journey when applying to college. Not everyone has the same level of understanding of the terms that are on our website. So really being able to like break it down and saying like, this is the difference between early action or early decision, so that everybody understands what they're getting into, being available to answer questions to questions the students are submitting. That's literally my job. Check my email, answer your questions. You're never bugging anyone. Like it's what we get paid to do. Yeah, so just making it a little bit more accessible. I know for Macalester, gosh, that was 2 summers ago already. When the pandemic started, we had some extra time on our hands because we weren't traveling or doing this or that. And so we created some workshop Wednesdays, and it was about finding your sense of belonging, what people used to call fit before, navigating the admissions process as a US domestic student, as an international student, the differences between the different types of colleges, like those things. So really, again, just going back onto the websites of the colleges or just a Google search as well. Like I am looking for a workshop about how to receive a letter of recommendation, how to build out my college list, those types of resources. So yeah.
And I know that Mariana put in the chat, actually, Ethan Sawyer, the college essay guy, he's speaking later today on writing impactful college essays, but he also has, or his company has a Matchlighters program, and Mariana put the link to the Matchlighters Scholars Program in the chat. And that is a really good resource for pro bono college counseling. So if you are an undocumented student or a student that, no matter your status, if you feel like you can afford help in the college process and you want more one-on-one guidance, that's a great program to check out. You do have to have at least a 3.0 GPA and financial need, but then they will give you great support during the application process. And then Metzli also mentioned that sometimes immigration organizations have resources and more one-on-one guidance that you can get as well. I know that she currently works with the New York State Youth Leadership Council, and they have an Undocu Academy that focuses on college support. So we have a lot of resources we're going to put in the chat. We are also going to make sure that we email out resources as well. But there's some really great resources put in the chat. Of course, if you have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A. On this topic of guidance, though, one of the things that is often a concern for all students, but especially if you are someone that's new to this country, you might not know where you want your career path to go, right? There's just a lot of decisions that you're making. And then now all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't know what major I want. I don't know where I want to go with my career. I don't know how to put schools on my college list because I feel really lost and overwhelmed. So I wanted to ask me, first off, you're a consultant. So I want to ask you how you kind of found that path, but then also, can you speak to a little bit of this fear, this question of how can students who have already so much uncertainty with their documentation status try to find certainty in their future, in their career, when there's so much about their future that is not certain?
Yeah, so my first job out of college was actually like in a fellowship for the County of Sonoma in California, and that was sort of like a more public policy oriented job. And I got into that just because one of my professors had told me about the opportunity. So I think talking to a professor that you trust, talking to a professor that understands your citizenship status and your like concerns about the future is really important, just because they have so many connections while you're in school that they can lead you to. They are so more experienced in life and like in the professional world than I was. So they had so much to offer in terms of advice, connections, networking, and things like that. So that was really a crucial part of my, I guess, journey to finding out what I wanted to study. Kind of like what Metzli said, like I changed my major like a couple of times. And that was like really weird for me just because I thought I was into like anthropology or American studies, and I really wasn't sure about it until I talked to students that were older than me, students that were like juniors or seniors that could talk about their experience. A lot of them had advice on what classes to take first. A lot of them had maybe like things that they regretted when they were like first years or sophomores. So that was really helpful in learning just from other people. I think especially as an undocumented student, as a first generation student, having those like stories being told is probably the best way for me to have learned kind of where I could go with my studies, where I could go in terms of job opportunities and things like that. I got into consulting because a friend of mine actually recommended this job to me. So I think just like those friendships you gain are not just for like to have fun with, but friends that support you along the way of like actually wanting to see you grow and thrive is really important. So my friend recommended this job. And yeah, it's a very difficult job in terms of consulting just because it's a lot of hours, but I think I've been able to balance it well. Just in my free time, I do like volunteering work with immigration rights organizations, and I think that really helps balance out like this consulting career that I'm not sure is going to be like my job for the rest of my life, but at least in the meantime, I'm doing something valuable with my free time.
And we never really know what our job is going to be like for the rest of your life, right? That's kind of a concept that I feel like is going by the wayside a little bit. There's so much fluidity. Mariana, you're someone that's done actually a lot of things in your professional life, both in the academia realm with Princeton and other organizations, but also now as an admissions coach. So I'd love to hear from you what made you go into admissions, but also if you could talk a little bit about your career journey and your path and the way that you've been able to stay connected to community that way as well.
Yes. So first, becoming a coach and helping kids apply to college, I think I had two big influences. One is the same one that made me want to be an academic. There is a Black feminist philosopher who passed away recently. Her name is Bell Hooks. And when I was in community college, I watched the video with her, and she talked about teaching kids in community college the same way she taught them at Yale. She used to be a professor at Yale, and she quit Yale to go to City College in New York. And I wanted to be like her. I wanted to be an academic like her. And along my path of becoming an academic, I realized that I wasn't winning, all the prizes that you need to win to have a great job as an academic. And I had a child, and I really wanted to have more time for my family. So I thought, what else can I do that I can have the same impact? And I thought, well, maybe I won't help kids in college think critically and have the same kind of privileged education, whether they're in community college or in the Ivy League. But I can help kids who don't have access gain that access. So I wanted to become a coach that way and help kids apply to college, because this is such a short amount of time that we spend with you, but it can have such a big impact on your life chances and what you do in life, and you're being happy with what you do, which is much more important than what you do. Yes.
Absolutely.
I think I answered both parts of the question.
Yes, you did. Yeah, no, it was great. I love bell hooks as well. And I really like this concept of, doing what you can do to kind of rebalance that equity, right? I think sometimes it's easy to see private consulting as being a way to increase the wealth divide and wealth gap, but at least we definitely believe here, and I know that you share similarly, that a lot of our job can actually be to decrease the wealth gap and decrease the information gap, right? Information dissemination, as I talked about in the introduction, is one of the most powerful things, because when you're not armed with knowledge and information, you can make those decisions that can have lifelong impacts. And so I definitely, I love that, and that balancing of equity, and even kind of thinking about equity, Metzli, I know that you are someone that is an advocate for undocumented students. I'd love for you to talk about how you work with equity, and also kind of speak to the question similar to Veronica's question. Based on your experience, what still needs to be done? Where are we falling short as a country? I mean, there's so many places we're falling short as a country, but what work still needs to be done, and what would you like to see changed in terms of overall support for undocumented students?
Yeah, this is actually so funny because I'm currently completing my thesis, and this touched base like perfectly on this. And just to answer your question, I definitely think that in 2022, undocumented students specifically have obviously gotten a lot more visibility. I have an older sister who attended college in 2012, and we had completely different experiences because, you know, a lot of people didn't know what undocumented even meant, or like that they were even undocumented students. And one thing that I really advocate both at Barnard and outside of Barnard, which is the school I attend, is that this assumption the undocumented students automatically equal DACA students, because while both DACA and non-DACA students are undocumented, they do have different paths. And so like, while I'm a DACA recipient, I have the privilege of, you know, having a work authorization, having a social, and like not really having to worry about getting a job because I just have to apply. However, I have noticed that a lot of the stress comes from this whole idea of, oh my goodness, like I don't have DACA, I don't have a work authorization. Why am I doing this degree for? Like this is for nothing. Like I'm not even gonna get a job. And so a lot of kids do get discouraged with that, and it's understandable. However, I feel like the college and, you know, like your network should really be a support system, and in a way that reassures you that if you want to go to college and you want to get a job, obviously there's certain things that you cannot go into, like most likely like medical field. I know that undocumented students that don't have a social can't become like doctors and nurses, and just becoming, I guess, familiar with your actual options and not just closing off all the doors just because one door is closed, you know? So I know I have a lot of friends that are non-DACA recipients that get hired as contractors that still do the work that they wanted to do. It's just a little different on getting like hired to work at the company than like their peers. But I do think that we need a lot more representation for like overall undocumented students, because I know that I had a friend in college that was really like what was tearing her down because she didn't know what was going to happen next.
Yeah, no, I can see that shakes your confidence as well, right? And it keeps you from, sometimes it can like start to demotivate you. And finances is a really big hurdle, right? Whether it's finances after college or finances to even get to college. So I'd love to hear maybe Veronica, if you want to touch on what, I know that Mariana put some really great links to scholarships that you can get, but what are other ways that students who are undocumented might have to fund their education? And maybe what are some situations that you've seen where students maybe haven't been able to get those scholarships, but have still found a way to make that work?
Yeah, so Mariana did share that list. I'm lucky to work at an institution that meets 100% of demonstrated need for all students, even undocumented and documented students. So that's a really good way to fund that journey. I also know of QuestBridge, which some people might be familiar with. They work as a match program, and so you have to apply to the program. Maybe you become a QuestBridge finalist, and then you rank your schools in order. Schools then read your application, they rank you. And if there's a match, and you get a full ride, and that's really great.
We all love full ride.
We love a full ride, yeah. And thanks, Mariana, for dropping the link in the chat. Sometimes students, unfortunately, do not become match finalists. However, QuestBridge then covers all of their application fees, which again, if it's free, it's for me, so yes. And then you can continue to apply to those schools that offer full financial aid if those are the ones that are at the top of your list. Looking at outside scholarships as well, that would be really helpful. Those are the things that really come to mind.
No, I think that's helpful. Mariana, yes, please add to that.
Okay, so I want to add that you don't need to have perfect grades to deserve an education. And a lot of those resources, the colleges that meet full need for every student, including undocumented students, are very, very competitive. And if you're a good average student going to the average type of high school that students like us go to in this country, you may, just not feel like these schools are accessible to you. So there are also other ways. Look at your state. The full ride is sort of wonderful when it happens, but it doesn't happen to almost everyone. And all of us who don't get a full ride still deserve to go to college, still need some kind of post-secondary training to find a path. So definitely look at your in-state options, especially if you're in an in-state that gives some financial aid to undocumented students. That is a wonderful way to fund your education if you're lucky to be in one of those states and have spent 3 years in one of the high schools in those states. So I'm going to say aim high, aim for those schools that meet 100% of financial need, but also aim local. Aim for your in-state public that is in your community, if you're lucky enough to have an in-state public in your community, because a college can be generous or it can be affordable. It just can't be any of the two. You need to have on your list affordable colleges and generous colleges. And that's how you get access, even if you don't get into one of those schools that meet 100% of need for everybody.
I love that. I love that. It can be affordable or it can be generous, but it has to be one of the two. I think that's you're dropping a lot of quotes today. I'm putting some in the chat. I love that. I'm actually going to follow up and ask you, we have a mix of people listening today, right? We have counselors, we have teenagers, we have parents. And, with the work that you do with families, what are ways that parents can best support their students who are trying to this process, understanding that they really might not feel like they're very empowered? How can parents help students of undocumented students status?
So many ways. I mean, it makes a huge difference who your parents are, and it's perhaps not the way you think it does. One issue is undocumented students are ineligible for FAFSA, which is what all the other students complete. But if you live in one of those states that provide aid to undocumented students, your parents are going to need to file a tax return and give you their tax return to submit in your application. So have your parent talk to a counselor. It's super important for you to have a counselor that you're comfortable enough, whether it's at school, whether it's through another organization, such as someone like Sydney or through Matchlighters, whoever is the adult that is helping you in this path, have a connection with your parent and explain to your parent how to file a tax return if they usually don't. Most immigrants I have met in this process do already, but some don't. So they will need to file a federal tax return, even if they're undocumented, and you're going to need that tax return to gain access to scholarships. So your parents are going to be your biggest advocate because it's so important. They need to help you in other ways. One is if you're admitted to a college that's the best option for you and is far away, they need to be comfortable and prepared to let you go. So they need to build some confidence with that institution that you're, dating, sort of, deciding if that's the one you want to go to. So your parents need to be involved. They need to have trust in that institution to want to send you there, even if it's halfway all the way around the country. And the last thing is, if you're thinking that the best option for you is the state aid and you're going to go to an state public, it would be really advantageous if you were able to continue living with your parents, because most state aid that I've seen mostly California and New Jersey, will meet a lot of your in-state public's tuition and fees, but none of your living expenses. So if your parents can continue to support you, that is over half of your college costs, because it's not tuition and fees. Is you need to sleep somewhere, you need to eat, you need to have boots. If it's cold, you need to have a winter jacket, and all of that is costly. And if you're in college, you can't work enough hours to pay for all that. So parents are the biggest advocates. Even if you think your parents never went to college, they don't know what it is, they're still the people who are going to help you the most, and they know a lot more than you think, I think.
No, that's so helpful. And actually, Metzli and Minnie, if you're comfortable, either one of you or both, can you maybe talk about your parents' role in your process, and how that was helpful, or things that you learned about what parents can do in the process? Either.
I can talk a little bit about it. So I was fortunate enough that my parents are very supportive, and I always tell them that that meant a lot for me, because even though they were not able to support me financially or guide me through the college process, emotional support is always needed, and especially as like when you're applying to college, it's a very, very stressful application within itself, and then adding in the other layer of being undocumented, it's not a good time. However, my parents were honestly very not questioning in a way. When I asked for like the tax forms, I do know that I work in a college office right now, in my old high school, and sometimes we have parents kind of hesitant to even like let their kids see their tax forms. And I know that can be a little difficult for the child, because a student may just be like, it's not a big deal, like what's the big deal, like I just need this to go to college. But obviously, there's that underlying fear of maybe on the parent side, on the student side, of like, now they have access to my data, or like I don't want this anyone to see. And I feel like in those moments you can either try to explain to your parents, because a lot of our parents didn't go to college, and so a lot of them don't really understand how financial aid really works. And so really explaining to them and taking them step by step, or even like having them doing it next to you so they can see physically what you're doing, I think definitely has helped. I know my dad, I was completing the CSS profile for Barnard, and I was asking him the questions on the forum, and then he legit asked me as a joke, like they ask every little thing, and I'm like they're so like intrusive. I'm like, it's sorry, like it's not me, it's just that's what they want. Like I'm sorry. So yeah, I feel like definitely no, because remember at the end of the day that your parent is also learning as you go. So you are learning as well, but they are as well. So have patience with your parents, please.
And just really quickly before I get to Minnie, I just want to piggyback on that, because there are people that are listening, how important is that, or credible is that fear, right? That fear of like, okay, if I file my taxes, then they'll know, right? Or if I give them the information, we could get deported. Like, talk to me about that fear, because I know for a lot of families that is a real concern.
Yeah, I definitely feel like in at least in the cases I have worked with, I even sometimes offer myself, and I'm like, do you want me to talk to your parent? Do you want me to explain to them? Because obviously sometimes parents don't really trust their teenagers, or trust that they're telling them the accurate information. So sometimes even if you want to direct your parent to someone that can explain it to them, whether that's your college guidance counselor, whether that's someone at an organization, or maybe a very trusted adult that they trust, then I feel like that can help a lot, because sometimes the disconnect is just the trust factor between like a child and an adult. But yeah, I think that's
For myself, I think my parents didn't have like a ton to offer in terms of like help when I was applying, but I think they kind of understood the necessity of like tax documents. So they kind of like organized all of that, all the paperwork at least, and like gave it to me so that I had it like in front of me and I didn't have to keep like digging around for it. So it was all, they at least like organized everything. And I think kind of what Metzli was saying is like the emotional support, I think, was the most beneficial. I went to college sort of 6 hours from where my home was, and my parents, despite like working like 6 days a week and not having like paid time off or anything in their current jobs, they still like drove me to school. They like unpacked my stuff and then drove back home. Like that kind of support in non like tangible ways was just like really important for me to like transition from being at home and being in college. And they would like send me care packages. They would just like pack a bunch of food, like especially like they would pack a bunch of Korean food in my boxes. And that was just like one little thing that was like super great to see my parents supporting me in that way.
I love that, because I mean, parents, they want the best for you, right? Even if they don't know how to give you the best, they always want the best. And I think even for parents listening, I don't want you to feel like, oh, I can't provide financially, so I can help, right? I think what we're kind of all saying is that there's definitely ways to help. whether that's emotional, whether that's just asking questions, whether that's being okay to learn. We put a link again to our podcast, La Mayor Decisión. That's their podcast for Latinx students and families. It's in Spanglish. I know that Veronica is going to be a guest on our podcast soon as well, so we're pretty excited for it. But we want you to feel empowered, right? We want your students to feel empowered, but we want you as the parent to feel empowered too in this process, because you're involved in the process. It's not just something your kid is doing and it has nothing to do with you, right? The college process is a family process, is what we try to emphasize, is the whole family. And so you want to make sure that you are feeling like you can access resources and get help and ask questions as well too. We are almost at the end of our panel. We have about 10 or so minutes left. We do have a couple of questions, but I kind of wanted to, starting with Veronica, just touch base on, are there things we haven't covered yet in the student journey? I know we've touched on resources for applying and finding out and reaching out to counselors and students and admissions officers. We've talked a bit about financial aid and affording it, and even careers afterwards. We haven't talked as much about the first year student experience, and I know that's something that you work really closely on. So actually, before you even get into just generally what we haven't covered, if you could also talk about things that first year students who are undocumented might need to be aware of, or might be navigating any things that they feel like maybe they can't do, or maybe they think they can't do, but they really can do.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Minnie touched on this a little bit earlier, and she mentioned about going on the website, trying to find like the Department for Multicultural Life on different websites and the accessibility there, but really familiarizing yourself with all of the resources available at the school, and just learning like, oh, okay, this is a school I really want to go to, or the type of school I want to go to, but really knowing what will actually be there for you when you get there outside of the academics. Like, yes, academics are important, but if you begin struggling with your academics or your social life, what type of support is there then? So really getting to know those resources on campus. I know some schools also have little individual programs for special groups of students. So like our school has the Barnard program. Right now we have the FIRST program, which is what I work with. Lives of Commitment, Pluralism and Unity, different cohorts. Some of them are only for first years, some of them are 4-year-long commitments, others are as long as you want to do them. But really learning about like what they have to offer, and what they will expect from you as well. Some of them are a little more reciprocal. So for example, my first year program, it's called First Year Resources and Success Team. That spells out first with a Y. I work with a group of first year students that are low income and or first gen students. None of the ones I'm working with this year are undocumented. But this year, it's the first time we're doing it. It's really informal and just kind of going with the flow, seeing what students need this first year, being back in person after having a really wonky high school experience, and just saying like, oh, how are your academics? How's your social life? How's your mental health a little bit? And if they struggle in A, B, or C, just saying like, I know a friend in health and wellness or the Department of Multicultural Life, like trying to find solutions to whatever it is they might be struggling with. So really familiarizing yourself with, yes, the school, the location, the academic opportunities, but also the opportunities outside of academics that you may or may not need while you're there.
I love that. Anyone else want to kind of comment on what that first or even second year is like, when you're making that transition?
Yeah, I had a very difficult first year. And now that I look back at it, obviously I can laugh, but in the moment it was no funny business either. And I know for me, I really struggled with more of the social aspect in the manner that I felt really alone, and I was going to this new school that I knew nobody. and I was very shy, and so I didn't really like go to clubs and I dorm on campus, so I do have an advantage to like the campus life and all of that. But even on, because I dorm, like I would go to class and go to my dorm, to class and then my dorm. If they would have events, I wouldn't go because my anxiety, I'm like, I don't know people, I don't want people to think I'm awkward, you know, the typical anxiety that one gets when you're meeting new people. And once, I think it was in my sophomore year, once I started actually going to clubs and talking to people and, you know, really trying to build these connections with other folks on campus, really helped me a lot, because I didn't even realize something as small as like studying with your friends in the library, how impactful that is. Like if you would have told me that freshman year, I would have been like, yeah, no, I'm not studying with nobody. I'm going to be in my room by myself. Doesn't matter. If that's your vibe, that's your vibe. But that was not my vibe. I was just forcing myself for it to be my vibe. And I know that one of the major things that helped me was discovering my Undocumented Students Association at my college, because yeah, like it was nice having friends and having Latinx friends, having Mexican friends like me, but it was always still that added layer that I'm like, but you don't get it. Like you don't get what I'm going through. Like you don't really get it. Yes, you can like understand it, but like you don't get it. And sometimes you just want to talk about things like that and not have anyone just look at you like, you know, like and actually have like a conversation with someone. So I definitely think that if your school has a lot of clubs, like it doesn't have to be immigration related, and like go to these clubs, go to these events. And I know some of them are like really corny, but still go and like get acquainted with people, and like soon enough, like you're gonna start making friends and like really like have a strong like social life. Because I know that's one thing I struggled with a lot, which was very surprising for me, because I thought it was going to be the other way around. I thought that I was going to struggle with my academics and not the social part. But yes, the social part is definitely something that hit me hard in college, and thankfully now I'm pretty sure I got the hang of it my senior year.
I think for myself, like finding the Department of Multicultural Life was probably the most impactful um, resource that I had during my like transition from being a first year student. They had so much to offer, and kind of what Metzli said, like I was kind of nervous about going to these events, these like mixers and informational sessions that they had. But honestly, it was like the best decision I made to like go to these things. You know, if you want, you could just go there and sit, don't talk, and then leave. But at least you like kind of went out there. I actually found other undocumented students at a study abroad panel when they were talking about study abroad opportunities, and I wanted to go after the session to talk to one of the speakers about studying abroad as an undocumented student. And the student in front of me also happened to be asking the same question, like I just overheard. And I kind of just like went up to them and said like, hey, that was like also my question. I'm in this similar situation. And that's kind of how we met. And it wouldn't have happened if I didn't just like kind of put myself out there going to these events that the school was holding. And I think like another thing that I didn't realize probably until my junior or senior year is that colleges just have so much like free money to give out to students, like a lot of free opportunities that I feel like first gen students and documented students aren't fully aware of. So definitely ask about that. You can like get unpaid internships, but you can get paid through your school. You can go on trips to DC or to meet alum. And I think that was just like something that didn't really click with me until my junior or senior year. And I wish I knew that earlier.
I love that. Mariana, anything to add as we close out that question?
Yes. So my first year experience was very different. And I actually started in a community college in California, and then I transferred to Berkeley because I was a non-traditional student. I had come to finish high school in the US, gone back to Brazil, and then come as an undocumented immigrant, and then took a few years only after I became documented that I went to college. So building community in these campuses where people are working and are commuting in and going away is super difficult. It's really challenging if you're in these types of campuses, but it's absolutely essential to find your community, because that's what's going to keep you tethered. It's going to help you persevere, and it's going to give you understanding of your opportunities. There are special opportunities that you just don't hear about if you're not clued into the campus. So things you can do are go to office hours so you can build relationships with your instructors, talk to people you meet, even if they not become your friends because you don't have a dorm party. They're usually not college related parties, but you're going to meet people to do homework with them, get their phone numbers, get their Instagram, like connect with people who look like you and people who look nothing like you. You need those connections. They're going to tell you about opportunities you don't know about. Go to the writing center. If your college has a writing center, always go to the writing center. It's an amazing resource, a great place to meet people outside of class so you can actually talk a little bit and to get help with your writing. But it's both, I think it's both meeting people and getting help. And also go to math tutoring. If you're great at math, get a job there. And if you're not so great at math, get help there. So these are places where if you're in one of those schools that are less socially cohesive, where you don't have a dorm and you don't have a lot of parties, you can develop this social capital, which is just a fancy word for getting to know people. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I love that. And we're going to drop the link to the resources. I'm going to read them out again. But actually, let's just popcorn in these last couple minutes. We're actually going to restart with you, Mariana, and then we're going to go to Veronica, Metzli, and Minnie. You can close this out. Any last piece of advice or anything we didn't touch on, either from your own journey or just in general, that you want to share? So go ahead, Mariana, anything else that you want to share, either from your own journey or just any other pieces of advice we didn't touch on as we kind of close out?
Perhaps restate I just kind of glossed over the importance of finding an adult who's on your team and you're comfortable disclosing your undocumented status. Because if you're a college counselor at school, you happen to have a counselor at school that will help you, if they don't know your undocumented status, they are going to give you bad advice. They're going to insist that you complete the FAFSA when you're not eligible to complete the FAFSA. And a lot of us don't have that great counselor at school. So get connected with matchlighters, get connected with Sydney, find someone like me, find a local CBO. CBO are community-based organizations in your community who help students apply to college. These are great resources because they know all about your state rules, how much access there are for students like you in your state. So there are resources. And if you don't know where to look, talk to us and we'll help you find some resource that's right for you. But you need at least one person in addition to your parents or an older sibling to help you find your path. And I think it's really, really important that person knows about your undocumented status so they can give you good advice.
Amazing.
Yeah, my piece of advice would be similar to Mariana's. Just don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, as scary as that might be, especially as a 17 or 18-year-old. It's definitely still scary for me at times. It only gets easier, hopefully, is what I keep telling myself. Just be honest, communicate with people, ask all the questions you have. You know what you need, so really be vocal about that. So just advocate for yourself. It'll get easier, I hope.
Metzli and then Minnie.
Yeah, I think one thing that I have at least emphasized when I talk to other undocumented students applying to college is that they shouldn't feel pressured to include it as their college essay, because I know some people feel comfortable talking about it, some others don't, some don't even want to talk about it, want to include another story. And I always tell students that just because you're comfortable, like let's say telling this adult or telling your guidance counselor and you don't want to, but feel like in a way forced to, because I've seen that a lot with a lot of students that they think because they're undocumented, that has to be their college essay and it has to be about their immigration story. And I'm like, no, like if that's not what you want to write about, don't write about it. Write about your dog that you love so much and how impactful your dog has been to your life. Because at the end of the day, a lot of your essay is your place to genuinely show the admissions folks like who you are. And if maybe you don't want to feel comfortable talking about your identity, it's gonna not come out as genuine. And I always tell kids, like, I can tell when the writing is not genuine, and why would you want that? Because it's gonna, maybe it may affect you, may not, I don't know. But if you're not comfortable writing about it, don't. And just because it's, your peers' comfort level and they're gonna write about it, does not mean you have to as well. And I think that's very important.
I 100% agree with that. There can be sometimes a re-traumatization that happens when you feel like you must focus your college essays on your trauma or on something hard. It might be well-meaning advice. Your school counselor might say, write about something you overcame. Oh, you overcame that. But you have to have self-care as well. If it doesn't feel good, if it doesn't feel genuine, you do not need to write about it. I think that's very, very important advice. And then Minnie, bring us home.
Yeah, I think one thing that I wish I did more, just like growing up, was celebrating the little achievements. I think the fact that we're all here today, we're talking about this topic, and we're like thinking about college access is something like huge to celebrate. Even if you didn't get into a school, I think the fact that you like applied is something to like celebrate. So yeah, just don't forget to like be proud of yourself and acknowledge the accomplishments that you've made along the way.
I absolutely love that. We do have that resource doc that's going to be updated. Make sure you get that in the chat just to give you a sneak peek of what's on it, right? In case you're like, why do I need this resource doc? We have some general college resources from My Undocumented Life, which provides up-to-date information and resources for undocumented immigrants, including news and analysis, scholarship opportunities, health information, jobs, and discussion boards. We have the Northwest Immigration Rights Project, Deferred Action, and DACA, different program requirements and what documentation is required. We have a comprehensive list, the best schools for undocumented students pursuing higher education, as well as the Washington Dream Coalition, the College Guide for Undocumented Students, and a Student Refugee Asylee Student Handout. We also have information on financial aid and scholarships, FAFSA financial aid and scholarships, how to pay for college as an undocumented student, your guide to organizing your college search, the college scholarships, also from My Undocumented Life, colleges that meet full need for undocumented students, domestic undergraduate need-based and merit-based schools, Washington State scholarships for undocumented students, DACA renewal scholarships, LEAP, which provides scholarships and financial support for historically underserved and underrepresented students, regardless of immigration status, the WSAC resources for immigrant, undocumented, or DACA students, a Hispanic Scholarship Fund, the Dream.us, and also a comprehensive list of resources for fellowships, research opportunities, internships, scholarships, and postgrad opportunities at Cornell. We also have workshops and immigration support links by the Northwestern Immigrant Rights Project, the City of Seattle Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, and the WLH school rights, right? All children living in the United States, regardless of immigration status, have a right to go to a public school free through 12th grade. And the Washington Law Help provides school rights for immigrant and refugee children. We also have some mental health and resources from the Seattle Counseling Service and other free resources. Of course, we have a blog here at S. Montgomery Admissions Consulting where we do blog on resources for undocumented students. We've linked the link to our podcast, La Meilleure Decision, Tips and Tricks for College Applications, specifically geared towards Latinx students and their families. We have the guide to writing an impactful college essay. We have that in Spanish. I do not speak Spanish. I will not try to pronounce that. And we also have your guide to organizing your scholarship search, also translated in Spanish by Stephanie Sequeira, our assistant college counselor. We have full Latinx counselors here at S. Montgomery Consulting. So if you need college counseling in Spanish, we can provide that as well. And then we also link to the College Equity Index, which is an evaluation of campus culture for Black students. And we know that there's a lot of Afro-Latino students out there as well. So we are going to have a big round of applause virtually for our panelists. Thank you so much, Mariana, Veronica, Metzli, and Minnie. This was fantastic. You provided such a wealth of information and knowledge, and you were vulnerable and honest, and you shared your own stories. And I feel like there are students who are listening and parents and teens who are listening who are going to connect and maybe even apply to college if they weren't thinking of doing so before. So I can't thank you enough for your honesty and your generosity. We are going to hop into the first of our giveaways. We're giving away 4 1-hour free counseling sessions here at S. Montgomery Consulting. So we're going to hop into that link. And then at 2:30, so just in 10 minutes, we are going to have our panel on international student admissions, hosted by S. Montgomery Consulting Counselor Josiah Enos. You don't want to miss that. We have our lunch break where we're giving away a free SAT and ACT course, compliments of Apple Ruth, and then later we'll be joined by Ethan Sawyer, college essay guy, who is also giving away a free copy of his book, College Admission Essentials. So definitely keep the party rolling today, but thank you so much for kicking us off for a fantastic first panel, and we will see you guys soon.